So while Games Workshop have been keeping big previews coming for all their major game systems at Warhammer Fest, we've also got a rather interesting little teaser proposing war at a new scale. Looks like a new version of Warhammer Epic is on the horizon, so if you ever wanted to command some pint-sized Space Marines, then it may well be just round the corner. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking about the return of Warhammer Epic. Games Workshop's war on extremely small scale, entire formations of Space Marines, armoured vehicles and Titans clashing against each other, is remembered by a good degree of nostalgia by many, even if Games Workshop pulled support for this really quite a long time ago. Basically the news is that Games Workshop has put this teaser trailer out. For multiple reasons, it's looking pretty certain that this will represent a new version of the Epic game, so in the not too distant future we're probably going to get a big announcement, and to see Games Workshop's new take on a classic. For those of you who might not be as familiar with what Epic 40K is, it was one of Games Workshop's many classic specialist games, alongside things like Battlefleet Gothic and Necromunda. This one's long since faded into the past and stopped being printed just under 20 years ago now. Basically the idea of Epic 40K was that it's a specialist game that's 40k at a 6mm scale, so you get some very tiny little armies. You can command entire squadrons of things like Land Raiders, Imperial Knights, and big Space Marine flyers and things, and maybe have a war game that's a lot more about vast formations crashing into each other, dispensing with a bit of granularity of Warhammer 40k where every single model counts and can be moved differently. I feel like Warhammer 40k stuff, but small, definitely has a big appeal. There's lots of exciting stuff in the lore and background that maybe just isn't particularly practical to own at a 28mm scale, things like great big Warlord Titans for example. And having a small scale game means that you can get a whole bunch of things that exist in the lore but don't really fit on your tabletop, or you potentially can't afford with the crazy amount that Games Workshop charges for their biggest titans. Epic 40k has had a few incarnations over the years. I believe it started in around 1988 and then went on till about 2005. During that time it looks like it had 4 main editions and built up a fairly decent roster of lots of units from many different races and factions. Lots of focus on Imperials and Space Marines of course, plenty of stuff for Chaos going alongside, and also decent forces for other factions such as Orcs and Eldar. Then after that, it basically went unsupported for really quite a long time. Games Workshop just simply stopped making rulebooks and models for it, I'm sure much to the disappointment of lots of people who have been collecting and making armies for it, though I guess you could continue playing with the latest version of the rule sets against any other like-minded players who could scrounge together enough miniatures. Then in kind of recent history, at least in terms of Games Workshop's editions of things, the spirit of it has been resurrected a bit. Perhaps with 40k and Warhammer getting a bit more mainstream again, and the company taking different approaches, they have been gradually resurrecting a bunch of their specialist games. Necromunda happened a while back, and they also basically have 2 small war equivalents with Adeptus Titanicus set in the Horus Heresy with big stompy robots, and Aeronautica Imperialis giving us little flying machines, things like Imperial Guard Valkyries, Space Marine Thunderhawks, and nice Orc fighter bombers. There has been suspicion and rumours for a really long time now that these sort of releases have been setting the stage for a return for their epic system of the game. Potentially you'd have all these models already established that you could just plumb straight into it, as well as whatever else they released in terms of maybe more battle line units like infantry miniatures and squadrons of vehicles. In the context of that, I feel like this new teaser hasn't really been the biggest surprise in the world. Talking of which though, let's talk about Games Workshop's teaser. This was just thrown in at the end of the Horus Heresy and Old World reveals at Warhammer Fest. They did stream the reveal for it, but they didn't really say anything extra to this on the stream, just saying that here's a fun teaser that we're not going to tell you too much about, and then played the video. In supporting text for the video, we've got encoded messaging coming, report to the Strategium. On YouTube, the video is titled Battle on a New Scale, that is pretty telling all in itself. And the teaser text towards the end of the video is Command Legions, with a top-down view of the battlefield of the square formations moving to fight each other, with Imperial and Chaos iconography within each of them. I really am very certain at this point that this is the return of Warhammer Epic, though I have seen a few other people reacting online and saying that this could just be a mobile game or something like that. With the context though, that just isn't likely at all. When Games Workshop do these little teaser trailers, they don't do them for mobile games and things. This will be one of their core miniature offerings, and in particular the title Battle on a New Scale is very obvious. For a teaser video, this is pretty much confirming Epic as much as Games Workshop ever would. The symbols on the little formations though do look like it's going to be set in the Horus Heresy, and I guess that would kind of make it not really Epic 40k but more Epic 30k, a bit of a different beast, and it maybe does have implications for which models might be coming out for it and which armies won't get stuff. The way that we can tell that it's Horus Heresy is that there's that Eye of Horus logo on the antagonist army. That one tends to be used a lot more during the Heresy as opposed to during contemporary 40k. In terms of how a release of this might actually look, I'd guess it will probably tie in with the established 8mm things, so I guess that would mean it would be slightly bigger than the previous version of Epic that we've seen. The Adeptus Titanicus range has actually got fairly decent in size now, a fair amount of the Titans represented, plus really quite a lot of Knight variants. That could add quite a lot of power and versatility to Epic armies, even before you have the core range. And Aeronautica Imperialis does represent for a fair few factions, including Space Marines, which look like they'd be the headline act of this new thing. Setting in the Heresy though definitely does mean that it would likely be a Space Marine focus. I guess we'd call it Epic 30k rather than Epic 40k. And it maybe does mean that armies like Orcs and Eldar at an Epic kind of scale are a lot less likely. In Warhammer the Horus Heresy, Orcs and Eldar don't get rules. They do have plenty of other armies, but the focus is pretty squarely on the boys in power armor. I guess it's not entirely impossible they could visit those factions later down the line. Orcs in particular were fairly active during the Heresy, but if it did mean that they were committing to Epic 30k rather than 40k, a bunch of factions would likely just not see the light of day here. Things like Tyranids who arrived late or Necrons who woke up late wouldn't be great for them getting miniatures here. Still though, should be very interesting to see what Games Workshop come out with. It's pretty cool that they're just treading into this space again once more. My guess would be that we will get some sort of launch box with Space Marines versus Space Marines. I'm sure we'll be fairly likely to get most of the Space Marine most iconic units, things like Tactical Squads, Terminators, probably Land Raiders, which were fairly common models back in Epic, and probably all manner of other Horus Heresy era armor, things like the Sikaran Battle Tank. In terms of release date, I'd guess that this is probably going to be quite a way off still. I'd probably guess not till mid to late 2023, given that we haven't actually had the full announcement of it yet, and usually that precedes the release of actual miniatures by a good couple of months. Let me know your thoughts though. Would you be potentially interested in trying out a new version of Epic? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I do tend to cover Games Workshop's news and reveals, and I'll post new videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's the main reason I can justify spending quite so long talking about model soldiers each day. If you have been finding all the news and updates videos on the channel useful, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.